Today I'm going to share with you all my polyculture bed. First we'll go over what is polyculture, why it's something that you might want to know about, and then I'll give you a real life example in my backyard. Welcome to True Freedom Permaculture, where I show you all the tips and tricks you need to have a green thumb, even if you weren't born with one. First, what is polyculture? So polyculture is kind of the opposite of monoculture. And polyculture is a hybrid of two words, poly, which is the Greek word for many, and then cultura, which is a Latin word, kind of, from what I've gathered, has multiple meanings. It can mean like field, it can mean cultivation of plants, to cultivate. So obviously the cultivation of plants is what we're getting at here. So this is a technique where it cultivates many different things within one space, as opposed to what I mentioned earlier, monoculture, which is where you just have one vegetable or one fruit growing within one space. And there are honestly pros and cons to both. I know, being a permaculture channel, you might expect me to get on here and talk about the evils of monoculture, and that's not necessarily true. There are pros and cons. I would say for polyculture, the pro is obviously if you have a small amount of space, then it allows you to grow much more than you normally would be able to. An example that I reference quite a bit on this channel of polyculture is the Three Sisters Guild, which was originally created by the indigenous groups such as the Native Americans. So this is not something new. Maybe the terminology is newer, but really people have been doing this for a very long time. So for those of you not familiar with the Three Sisters Guild, briefly, it is just the corn stalks growing up. They provide a trellis for the beans to grow up and kind of climb up on, and the beans are a nitrogen fixer for the soil, and then you plant some sort of squash, finding squash as the bottom mulch layer, and that keeps everything nice and cool and suppresses weeds, etc. So that is an example of polyculture. Also, you might have heard of terms such as interplanting or companion planting, and these are examples of polyculture. So back to the sort of pros and cons of polyculture versus monoculture. I'll discuss each one, and then you can decide which one might be best for you. So in monoculture, this is what we see more in North America when it comes to traditional farming and agriculture, the one crop system. Now, you will get more yield if you just have like one crop of carrots than if you have carrots within a polyculture bed. So the yield is going to be greater. And then also monoculture is perfectly designed for machinery, or even if you're using human labor. So it just depends on what your objective is. So obviously if you have a machine, for example, it can go along and, let's keep with the carrot theme, pluck the carrots and do whatever, till them up, whatever they do, much faster than if you have a polyculture bed. You have different things growing, and you're going to have to do different things in order to harvest all the different things growing within that space. So that's an example too. Now, polyculture, I would say the benefits are being able to grow a wide variety of items within a smaller space. And polyculture is not limited to, let's say, fruits and vegetables. What's nice about it is that for the home gardener, let's say if you have a family where you're trying to be more self-sufficient, then they can grow things like walnut trees, for example, where you get the walnuts, but then you can also use the wood for lumber. They can have chickens there that are kind of scratching up the earth and also fertilizing it at the same time. So they have eggs, and then they obviously have the chickens for meat if that's something they want to do. Then you also have the vegetables and the fruits that you're growing within all of that. So within a single space, you could in theory provide a lot of your needs. So I would say that the whole is greater than the sum of all of its parts. And that is a real benefit to polyculture. Something else you want to think about too is aesthetics. So if you like those beautiful gardens where everything is like neat and tidy and everything's like perfectly manicured and looks very orderly, then monoculture might be your thing. when you have polyculture, when you have nature, it's more similarly mimics nature, I should say. Nature isn't tidy. It's kind of chaotic, and things are growing everywhere, and it's not homogeneous. Things are unique. You can't control for some things. It sort of makes the whole thing less maintenance because you're not trying to get it to conform to something specific shape. You know, like hedges, for example, you constantly have to trim them because you want these like cool looking but unnatural squares or whatever it is. So polyculture is going to be, like I said, it's going to have much more variety. It's just going to be a different aesthetic. I happen to think it's actually more beautiful, but that's just a personal opinion. But it depends on what kind of look you are trying to achieve. So that's something else you want to think about when you're deciding in between monoculture and polyculture. And that being said, if you have a garden, you can have some areas that are monoculture and some areas that are polyculture if you have the space. So it's not like you necessarily have to fully subscribe to one or the other. So I think that one of the best ways to learn, at least for me, I'm a visual learner, is to show you an actual example. So we're going to head out to my garden and I will show you an example of a polyculture bed that I have going. Here's an example of my polyculture bed. So at first glance you might not think that there's a lot going on except for the dandelion weeds. So I do need to do a little bit of weeding, or maybe I'll eat them. Not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna eat them. But let me just show you a little bit of what is going on. So to the left here, that's to the south side, so that's going to receive the most sun. And then if you head up to the north side of the bed, this is going to receive, I would say, like the least amount of sun, but I purposely tried to grow things. Like you can see last season's Jerusalem artichokes, which I've slowly been digging up as we need them to cook. These plants are going to be tall enough that they still receive sunlight, which is why I put them in the back of the bed. Now, as we go along here, you can also see horseradish, which, as you've seen some of my other videos on horseradish, you know that horseradish can literally grow anywhere. It doesn't need a lot of sunlight, so I tucked it away in the back here, and that's why it's living there. Now, let's go along, keep going, and you can see it's springtime here, and we have some asparagus. So I've been planting asparagus for a few years now. It's such a great thing to have. It's really exciting to not have to buy it at the store either. So you can see that it's just starting to come up. I've only harvested a couple spears so far this year, but you know, soon we're going to be getting more and more, and we've been getting a lot of rain, so we're definitely going to get more. But yeah, and you can see just how water-filled these spears are. I'm going to eat this. I'm definitely going to eat that. But these are cropping up all over. So I have both purple and I have green here. There's a purple spear. So yeah, you'll kind of see these cropping up all over. And normally there is also a layer of strawberries that's just like all planted. It's the mulch layer, and it keeps everything nice and cool beneath it, and it helps to suppress weeds. And because I just kind of neglected this bed, you're not going to see that as much. I don't even know if I have any strawberry plants right now. Oh, I have one. I have one left over, but not as they were. And I kind of just let the grass take over. But I do plan on planting the strawberries back in here at some point. Normally, the bed of the garden would have a cover of strawberries growing over it, which this is not the same section of the garden. It's a different portion of my garden, but you can see how the strawberries form this nice mulch layer, and it keeps everything cool. All the roots beneath, the ground beneath. So it's a really nice element to the bed. If the strawberries were growing normally, I plan on trying to recreate this again because it did work well at one point. I just found a little bit of some strawberries. I was lifting up some of the grass, so hopefully this will come back and start to fill out again. We have things that have just naturally cropped up, like the dandelions, so we do eat the flowers and the leaves, and you can eat the roots, but we typically don't. And some other things, like this is a rogue red raspberry from my patch, which is not too far away. So I've got that going on. I'll probably take these out just because I think that they're going to be shading out some of the other plants. So I'm not going to be leaving those in here. But let's keep moving on here. Okay, so here you can see we've got more asparagus coming up, and then we've got rhubarb here. And the rhubarb is great. It does require full sun, so I have that located near the front of the bed, but that's something that also grows really nicely with the strawberries and the asparagus I have found. There's another one in the back there too. So as you can see, you can actually fit quite a bit into a garden bed like this, much more so than if it were just like one crop. Because if you think about if I had to grow like the rhubarb in one bed, and then the strawberries in one bed, and the asparagus in one bed, that's a lot of beds. So instead, I can fit all of this into a space which I would say is about maybe like 4 feet by 8 feet-ish. So that's quite a bit of food in such a small space, which is nice because I don't have a ton of land. I just have to show you some of the asparagus I've been pulling up as we've been going along. Oh, I just dropped one. I'll get that later. But I don't know if you can tell, but this one here on the right is giant. I don't know what it is this year. Maybe it's the rain we've gotten or something, but the asparagus spears are absolutely ginormous. Not complaining, but yeah, just wanted to show that to you. Another benefit of polyculture that I forgot to mention is that you can have certain things like dill, for example, in your bed, and it will attract certain insects, predatory insects that will actually wipe out destructive insects like aphids, for example. So things like that. It can attract pollinators to your garden if you have like some wildflowers, for example, and they will attract the bees so they can pollinate, let's say maybe the currants that you have or whatever it is nearby. So that's another benefit of polyculture that I wanted to make sure that I included because it is important. So as you could see with my bed is composed of perennials, and you can actually choose in between annuals or perennials. So obviously the annuals, you'll have to reseed them every year, and the perennials, like that bed, I can kind of just let go and do its thing. So that is another option that you have if you're deciding to set up a polyculture bed. I hope this video was helpful for you, and that way you can make your choice on how you want to structure your garden, and maybe you're thinking of ways that you can incorporate crops that you didn't think of before. I will see you all again soon. Thanks for watching.